Hello, I'm John Lira, and in this demo, which is quite interesting and technical, I want to show you how to use Informatica's PowerCenter to stage data into the Informatica Master Data Management staging tables. This is not the same demo as another demo that I have in which I show you how to land data. This is how to get landing data into the staging process of the MDM hub, which is a little bit more complex. Now the requirements are that you have MDM and PowerCenter installed and fully operational. This demo requires MDM version 9.5 and up, but be careful. Anything is subject to change in the future. So what I'm going to show you, it may have to be adjusted as you move on to other versions. So this is on 9.5 of MDM using 9.1 of PowerCenter. Now, it also assumes that you have already created landing tables and staging tables, and it does require a deeper knowledge of the staging tables structure, what columns are generated, what columns are required, etc., because we're going to have to provide all that information through a mapping. Also, it requires you that you have the PowerCenter custom transformation for the MDM part that we're doing for the staging. And then again, that you should know how to create mappings and workflows in PowerCenter, which you should know by now. So let's see, I'm going to go into the hub, and let me just tell you what is it that I want to do. In the hub, we have landing data, and we create based objects that have staging tables in them. The idea is I've gone into customer and I have staging tables, and the idea is that I will populate the staging tables from the data in the landing tables. So you'll create various staging tables. Now I create a mapping object, and let me just select the one that this is loading data from. So traditionally people use the hub to create mappings after they've created the landing tables, after they created the staging tables, and so they're going to create mappings to move data from the landing all the way to the staging table. Notice that you need a p-key source object, you need a last update, and then your data, full name, customer. In this example, there's a conditional function as well as a cleanse list. Now, we're not supposed to go into all the details of a mapping. If you would like to know how to create a mapping, please feel free to take the full MDM Hub course. And so this is a mapping that we normally do. What some customers want to do, they're saying, why do I need to do it this way? Why do I need to learn this way if I already have PowerCenter, etc.? So I'm going to show you how to solve that issue, that problem, using PowerCenter. So let me go to my schema, and let me just create a dummy staging table. Since all of these already work, I need to create one. I'm going to acquire a lock, and I'm going to create a staging table that you're going to see that at the end I'm going to populate. This is going to be called STG, just lack for a better name. I'm going to call it STG Sales Customer. So that'll be my landing table. There goes the physical name, STG Temp Sales Customer. And I know that I need to select full name, and I need, this is coming from the sales system. First of all, got to correct that. And customer class. The sales system will only provide full name and customer class. Full name is first name, last name. Customer class, whether it is a person or an organization company. So there goes my staging table. At this point, I would normally now go ahead and go to mappings and start defining my mappings, but that's the solution I'm offering you, where you bypass that step. So what I'm going to do is minimize this, and I'm actually going to release the lock so that I'm guaranteed that I'm not touching it. And now we're ready. We're ready to create a mapping that will populate data from the landing onto the staging. But first, there's a few things and a few requirements that you've got to have. First of all, you've got to have, there's a couple things you need, and when you bought Informatica MDM, and you got to know where it is installed. In my case, is Info Admin under the hub, and under the resource kit, Informatica has given you something called PC MDM adapter. It is a new transformation, well, 3 transformations that Informatica MDM consultants have created. And so there's a jar file and It's something called the MDM Mapping Creator XML. The jar file has to be copied to the PowerCenter environment, and so I recommend that you read the notes on that. And the XML one is what we're gonna use. So the MDM adapter, you quickly want to copy it to wherever PowerCenter is installed. It's under Informatica, in this case 9.1. It is under server, and here under the server bin, I've already copied it since I've been using it, and you'll see that in my bin Java lib directory, there it is. So that's a requirement. You've got to copy it right there. PowerCenter installation server bin Java lib directory, and that's what I have. Okay, the XML will be imported. So once I do that, also be careful. You must also configure in the environment level, whether it's Unix or Windows, you've got to configure the class path environment. So there's a special, you got to just know that you've got to include, and let me just show you, if you can just follow this, you've got to put all this into the class path of the definition of your environment variables. So again, if you don't know how to do that, you just got to make sure that you specify the full the JDBC drivers for Oracle. So you got to put that in the class path. Otherwise, you're going to get an error. That actually is what took me a while to get correct, and I've done it. So those are system requirements. And now what you do now is you go to, remember that I've created a brand new staging table. So now you go to PowerCenter, and under Dev01, I have created a mapping, and what I did, I imported it. So there's that mapping that I told you that you import, the mapping adapter, the MDM mapping creator, and this is what it creates. How did I do this? You go to imports, and remember where I showed you, you go ahead and find it. You go ahead and find that XML file, and it is where Informatica is installed. So I'll quickly go wherever Informatica is installed, and I'm going to probably skip a few steps because I don't really, that's not the focus of this. These are system requirements. So under Informatica MDM Hub Resource Kit and under adapter, all you've got to do is bring it in. That's it. When you bring it in, this is what you end up with, and you have this beautiful, elegant mapping. Now, this is a template generator. It's a holding pattern. It's going to have a landing to stage configuration definition file, and it's going to have an environment parameters file. So again, these two I'll show you in a moment, but this is the secret, this transformation here. So let me just show you the transformation itself. Notice that there's a landing to stage details and an environment, and this is what we're going to configure. So essentially, if you look at this, we're going to configure the JDBC driver class, the hub, the DB user, the password, the hub user, everything that we would have to configure if we were doing the staging in the MDM hub. So all this is done for us if we're using the MDM hub. Since we're going to bypass it and we're going to land directly to staging data, we, the developers, have to provide all this. And at the end, we're just going to release it to a target file. But essentially, this MDM mapping creator is going to generate two other mappings for us, and we'll see that. So this is the one we bring in, and you do have to define the sources and targets, and essentially, as long as you know the names, then you can call them whatever you want, as long as you define them correctly. Let me show you what I called them. So remember, this is coming from the Informatica PowerCenter directory. So wherever Informatica is installed, in the InfoShare directory, I created two files called landing staging details JL, my initials for John Lira, and I created an environment variable. Reading the user guide on this, or the tech notes, you basically have to create a file called landing to staging details JL.txt, and you're going to provide these arguments: the name of the landing table, the name of the staging table. Remember, I just created this again, STG temp sales customer, and then which is going to be the P key source of that mapping. Remember that if I don't do this, if I use the hub, I would have to create the mapping that assigns the last update date, the P key source, any cleansing that I want. In my case, it's very straightforward. These are the three attributes: the landing, to the staging, and the P key source is customer ID. So that's the file. Remember the name. It's landing to staging details JL. And then the environment is actually a little bit more complex. If we edit this, you just gotta follow the notes and specify exactly what you have. Here is the Java, and again, this is the Java class, the JDBC class for Oracle, and then also where my server is, where Oracle's installed, and I'm using InfoRCL, and then my ORS name. My ORS is trn_lab. My password to my ORS, my username that I'm logging in is admin, and then the URL for the hub, info, server, etc. So again, you just got to specify all this. Those are the details. And assuming I did that correctly, and remember, there is a document for this. The document that you wanted for this, it's called the Informatica MDM Multi-Domain Edition for Oracle, and it's the PowerCenter Custom Transformation for MDM. So I'm getting some of this information from a guide because otherwise it would be a lot to remember. And assuming that the landing and configuration are correct, and again, trial and error, you might get things wrong. It took me a while to make sure that at the Windows level, my class path was set correctly, and I'll show you that point in a moment again. So once you have this fully defined, you will validate, and again, this is already valid. You will save, and then you need to create a workflow for this, which I have done already. So remember, I'm Dev04, and I have a workflow for this, and it's called WKF, landing to stage, and you open it, make sure that it is the correct session that's running the mapping, and you go and configure it, the landing. Remember the two definition files, the landing to stage? Well, here it is. Source, landing to stage, details, jl.text. Then the environment, and that really took me the longest to do. Again, ends in JL, environment parameters JL text. And then the targets are two of them. A result file, which is sort of, again, a dummy file. If something fails, it'll tell me error. But really what I want is the XML. That is the output that I want, which will become input. I will import it as two separate, you'll see in a moment, as another mapping with two transformations. And I'm going to call that XML LDG to STG stub XML. And I called it stub because you'll see that it's pretty much a template for it. So assuming that I've done this correctly, I will refresh my mapping, and I'm going to go ahead and run this. Even though I've already run this, I'll go ahead and run this, start workflow, and you know that it's going to open up the monitor, and in this moment here it's going to be running, and that's the bottom one here, and it'll run. Now I've already run this, so I'm going to show you the output. When the output will be stored in the info-shared info-shared target files, and here is the XML stub file. Let me make sure that it runs it because I actually gave it the same name. There it is. It's still writing, and let me just give it a few more seconds because I want to open it, and of course I don't want to lock it. So here is the XML file, and let me just show you. I'm going to show you the XML1.out, which is exactly the same but without the conflict of the name. And essentially this is an XML file that you'll see the results, and we don't really have to study it. We just have to know that the next step is to import this. And let's see, I think I have it already open. Come on, it's edit with okay, Murphy's Law. All I'm trying to do is open it. And come on. Can't take that long, can it? It's just a text file. Let me look and see what happened. Okay, there it is. There's the file. Okay, now we're not going to take time to read this, but if you wanted to, you can see what the output is. it's much better for me to import it and show you what it is that I have. So let me minimize all this. We don't need all that information. And going back to PowerCenter, what I'm going to do is log in as developer 3 just to show you how I would import that. Now notice I've logged in to developer 3 connected and there's no mappings, nothing. So let me import it. So I'm going to import that mapping and I'll go get it. It's under the InfoShared target files and you'll see, and there it is. Import and go ahead. If there's any conflicts, we have to resolve it. And go ahead, straightforward, import it. Done. And then, since I'm working on a standalone file, you'll see what I have. Now notice, the mapping is invalid. This was generated by the first mapping. Let me bring it out. And the reason it's invalid because, as you know, it is not technically a valid PowerCenter mapping. What am I missing? Well, two things I'm missing is a target and a source, even if they're placeholders, even if they're to be dummies. This cannot be a valid mapping according to PowerCenter unless I bring in a dummy source and a dummy target. And then what else can you do? From the landing, this is the transformation from the landing table to the staging. In here, I'm going to delink these ports and add whatever cleansing, whatever transformation I want, and then compile it, and then I would be able to go ahead and run this. Now, this one I've already completed. So dev03 is a dummy folder. Let me go to dev02, and in here you'll see that I have already completed this. So notice here's I had to add a dummy landing, and I just added the same one from before, landing to staging, and I added a dummy resolve file. Those are just placeholders in order to make it valid. What I added and what's important is what I put under the FX. So let me arrange all so you can quickly get a glimpse of this. And again, this is just a dummy source that I had to bring in. I leveraged it from the previous mapping, and a target. So I won't spend time on those. What we do want to see, you do have to link it, by the way, as you know, in order to be a valid PowerCenter mapping, something must be linked to Go. It's just dummy. It will never be used. And also on the results, you've got to connect at least one port, so the run summary to the results. But we're not going to read any data. These mappings were generated by the first transformation. Remember that transformation that we created earlier? Let me go to developer 1, just so that here it is. This transformation that read my two configurations created the XML. I imported the XML, and with that is how I end up with this mapping. So let me just make some more space here. And what did I do? Well, very simple cleansing. This is what I would normally do in the MDM mappings, but this is actually very, very simple. All I do is bring customer name, customer type, and let's go inside. And this is just a demo. So customer name is an input. I send it out as an output, and all I do is make it uppercase. Let me just show you. I make it uppercase, I trim it, and that's it. And then customer type, I use the D code. And if the customer type is IND, then set it to P for person. Otherwise, set it to O because it's an organization. So again, very trivial. I could have added more. I could have sorted data. I could have done whatever I need to do. But I just wanted to show you. There goes, it's very small. And like any other mapping, you must validate this. And what's next? We got to create the workflow. So remember that I'm working under developer 2. And in here, I have that workflow. And here is the mapping, the big one that I was just configuring. And notice under the mappings, these are just dummies, so I don't really have to set them. I actually set them to real values, but they're not going to be used. And there's no connections. And all you do at this point is make sure that this is refresh in case we change the design, validate, and we're almost done. I just gotta run it now. So when I run this, I'm going to start the workflow, and of course monitor comes in, and I'll just show you that it is running. And while it's running, let me go back to the mappings and review a couple things. It is a complex solution. It is not easy. So remember how we started out. First, in Developer 01, just to keep things separate, this is the XML that I imported. I configured the landing to staging detail files and the environment. That was a little bit hard, and then all I do is run this, and it produced an XML file. That XML file was brought into dev02, which is the one that I'm currently running. And let me open the mapping. Oops, I don't want to copy it. Double click. Here it is. And let me arrange all so that you can see where you would troubleshoot this. So let me make some more room by expanding. And if you look at this first one, landing, from landing, sales customer, if you double click and go to ports, you see the ports right there. But what's interesting is the initialization properties. All those the two parameter files, the two input files in the first mapping, here they go, the settings. The landing table, the staging table, the hub connection, the user, the password, who am I logging in as into the hub, and where are my JDBC drivers. So I could change this. I could reuse this mapping if I changed it, which is what I was doing earlier. And same thing for the other one called the staging to STG sales. Again, that's it. So remember, those were the parameter files that were read in from those two files that I gave it. So remember, we have this file here, the parameter files. Okay. So once I do that, let me go to mapping, and it has succeeded. There it is. So apparently it succeeded. And now the only thing remaining now is validation. How would I validate? Couple things. Probably easiest one is go to Oracle, and I should see a staging table with data. So I'm going to go make sure that I refresh. Remember that it's using the schema trn_lab, which is the one we use in our classes. And I'll just refresh the tables. And the one that I'm looking for is, let me refresh. And again, it's a little bit slow right now, but then I have a lot of things going on. And I'm looking for the STG. So where is the C_STG? Almost. Here it is. And I called mine STG temp, C_STG temp. And somewhere here it is. Notice how complex this object is. I have the sales customers, but here's the PRL, the raw, and the reject. All that is the same information that the PowerCenter mapping has to also take care of. So right now, I don't have delta detection or previously landing, so my configuration was quite easy. But in real life, you got to make accommodations for that. So I refresh, and there goes my staging table with all my 84 records. Now that's one way to validate. Let me go to the hub, and that's where I'm going to finish. So again, in the hub, I'm going to get a write lock. And remember, the staging table I had created, that's what I'm trying to populate. So if it worked out, there's a mapping that the PowerCenter mappings created. The PowerCenter workflow created this dummy one. It actually gave it the name called C_LDG sales. And you're never supposed to change this. The PowerCenter first mapping creates this, but it's a dummy placeholder. The second PowerCenter mapping is the one that executes this. So don't run the one that it was generated. We did not touch it, and you can look by the properties generated by Informatica's PowerCenter. Do not run directly in the hub. And then if that is my mapping, then I go to my batch viewer, and I go to my stage jobs, and there goes my stage job, as if I had run it in MDM Hub. I can see that it ran. I can see the records, etc. So I didn't do any of this here. The only thing I created was the landing table and the staging table. And I ran the PowerCenter mappings, configured them, and imported the XML that was generated by the first one, and ran this, and it actually did all this. extremely good example of how you can actually do things out of the MDM Hub. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, because some people consider that perhaps if you have PowerCenter or other solutions, you might want to do the staging there. So that now concludes our demo. And let me just go back. So there were two mappings that were created. This one here, this is the second one. That was the one. This is the one that I imported. And the one that started the whole game was this one right here. So again, very long, detailed demo, quite technical. And this is John Lira, and I hope that you enjoy this demo. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel.